Welcome to the Plant Report, a radio show that educates about the green world one plant at a time. The Plant Report is a new educational resource about plants, herbal medicine, ethnobotany, and the human-plant relationship. With over 400,000 species found worldwide, plants give us oxygen, food, fiber, and medicine, and add beauty and inspiration to our lives. Listen to our podcast, read our blog, watch our videos, and learn from experts and the plants. The Plant Report is a project of Sustainable World Radio and is hosted by Jill Cloutier. Thanks for listening to the Plant Report, because every plant has a story. My guest today is Michael Judd, permaculture teacher, designer, and author of Edible Landscaping with the Permaculture Twist. And welcome back to the Plant Report, Michael.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, and you are a self-proclaimed fun guy, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. What you call the shady fruit. It's not technically a plant, but what is our topic today?
Mushrooms, glorious mushrooms, all types that are grown outdoors in the landscape very easily, and yes, very fruitfully. A lot of people don't consider or think about mushrooms as a fruit, and they are one of my favorites in the shade.
You have planted food forests, and you are really into edible landscaping. Do mushrooms have a place in a food forest?
Oh my, they are the connector in the food forest. In any of our sort of healthy landscapes, ecosystems, mushrooms, which come from the connective body that we call mycelium, which is a group of thread-like cells that connect together, sort of like the internet. And they run through the landscape and usually digesting organic matter. And when they're really happy, they pop out mushrooms. That's what we know of as fruit. So yes, any healthy garden, landscape, forest has this interconnective web of fungi, of mycelium running through it. So yes, I think it's critical to any healthy growing system, especially food forests.
And so today we're going to be talking specifically about how to cultivate mushrooms outside. And so this is a different type of gardening, and you've done this a lot. And I believe you grow 3 different types of mushrooms.
Yeah, I focus on 3, and sometimes we get other volunteers, and sometimes we experiment with something new. But I've found 3 of these characters very rewarding and easy to grow. And 2 of them, the shiitake and the oyster mushroom, I grow on logs, so what we call log culture. And these are pieces of log that are about 6 inches in diameter by roughly, a meter long, 36, 40 inches long. And this is wood that we've cut from healthy trees toward the end of winter for the sap is rise in them. And then we inoculate these. Should I go into this detail already?
Yeah. So basically, you're cutting wood from healthy trees. Any tree?
You'd be surprised how many different tree species will grow some type of mushroom. Now, certain species do tend to like certain types of mushrooms, like certain species of trees. For instance, shiitake really likes growing oak. Oak has a really nice thick bark that protects the moisture in the log. And when it comes to growing fungi, when it comes to growing mushrooms, the main thing to always remember is moisture, moisture, moisture. They need consistent moisture to grow and to fruit. And once you get that down at every stage of the way, everything else will flourish. So yes, you'd be surprised at how many different species in your landscape, from your willows, your poplars, your maples, really most trees except for a handful like black walnut and black locust. Black locust is so rot resistant because it has strong antifungal properties. So obviously you wouldn't want to start with that trying to grow your mushrooms. But we're in the mid-Atlantic region of the state, and we have an abundance of oak and poplar and maple. So I work mainly with those species in our forest. Now, when we go out and look for healthy mushroom wood, we're going out and looking at the forest as a whole ecosystem as well. And we're thinking, okay, how can we benefit the forest and get wood for growing our mushrooms? And most of our forests have been cut multiple times and have sprung back with a grouping of saplings, which kind of chokes out the understory. So by going in there with an eye to thinning out some of that wood to allow more light and understory to develop, we are benefiting, our local forest system while getting the material to grow our mushrooms. So from the get-go, it's a win-win situation with working with mushrooms. And then, then we're selecting it. We want healthy trees, and we take them and we cut those into those log lengths, those meter log lengths, and let them sit for a couple of weeks, just so their natural antifungal properties can sort of dissipate. Then what we do is it warms up and the day temperatures are pretty consistently in the 50s, is we will get the strains of mushroom, let's say shiitake. We'll go to a supplier. Just like you would for your garden seeds, there are suppliers for mushroom, what we call spawn. They are usually little wooden dowels that have ridges on it, and the little mycelium, those little thread-like cells that I talked about, are growing on the wood already. They're eating it, it's kind of like kindling to them, right? They're just getting going. Or sawdust is often used. So what you do is you go to a supplier, someone like Paul Stamets' company, Fungi Perfecti. Another one of my favorites is Field and Forest. You can order these different types. So you can say, okay, look, I want shiitake that's going to fruit in the late spring. And so you choose that variety, and they send it to you in these little wooden dowels. And when they arrive, you take your log, which has been sitting for a couple of weeks, and you drill holes in it. You drill holes about every 6 inches in a straight line, rotate the log a couple of inches, and offset drilling those same 6-inch spaced holes down. And you keep rotating the log until your whole log is drilled with usually 40 to 50 little holes. And you take these little plugs that you've gotten, these little dowels, and you hammer them in. It's like whack-a-mole at the carnival. It is actually a lot of fun.
And it doesn't hurt the mycelium by whacking them?
No. Sometimes it jolts them and, gets them to jump off. And, that's the idea, is we want them to jump off of these little dowels into the log, because what they're doing is they're eating the wood, the cellulose, the lignin. That's what they consume. So they're going to jump off these little dowels and run through your log. And this is what we call sort of the spawn run. And it can take anywhere from 6 to 18 months. So you must be patient. Make your log happy. Put it where it's going to stay evenly moist.
How do you know if they're running? How do you know if they're moving into the wood? Can you see it?
Yes, sometimes you can. On the end of the log, you'll get sort of a little bloom, like a white stain on the end of the log. But sometimes there's no indication, and you just have to be patient.
You just must trust. You have to trust the fungi.
You got to trust the fungi. That's right. And if you've done things consistently, you've gotten your wood that was healthy. You didn't go out to the firewood pile and pull off an old log and try this. If you've gotten healthy wood and you've kept the moisture right, they are very easy. They are very aggressive in their growth, and then very productive. So after that spawn run of 6 to 18 months, they are going to be triggered by the right temperature and the right moisture. And generally speaking, that's sort of in the spring after a warm rain, or in the fall after a warm rain. At the same time as we notice the wild fungi around us blooming, our logs are going to want to probably naturally trigger, depending again on what variety they have. So basically what you're doing is just, monitoring and looking, and when they flush out, they can be so abundant. You can get up to half a pound of mushroom in one flush. And half a pound of mushrooms is a lot. If you put that in a bag, it would be a big Ziploc bag.
And shiitake mushrooms are so expensive in the store.
Well, yes, and usually the ones you're buying in the store have been grown indoors on sterilized wood blocks in a big metal building, and they taste like it. When you're eating one that you've grown on your own wood outside, you've captured all of the elements. It's like going out and finding wild mushrooms, except for that you have an improved strain, and you know what it's supposed to be. So that's kind of the advantage there. So you're a little safer. You know that you planted shiitake in that log. So when a mushroom pops out, if it doesn't look like shiitake, you shouldn't be eating it.
Yeah.
You have an indicator there. You take a picture with you if you've never grown it and hold it up. Like, yep, that's shiitake, and you're good to go.
So this is log culture where you get fresh wood and then growing the fungi on the log.
Yes, absolutely, and they can fit into any kind of landscape. I know people who are doing this in suburbia on a quarter-acre lot where they've set up shade net. They have no tree cover or anything. They set up shade netting and then worked out with a guy who cuts firewood to bring them in, certain size and types of wood. And they're stacking them up in this Lincoln log fashion under their shade netting. We're talking, thousands of logs here in a quarter of an acre, and they're setting up, little irrigation systems, and they're making a fair amount of money doing this. I mean, they've really moved away from, sitting at the desk to, really using their small piece of land and ingenuity to grow mushrooms, which have a very high market value, if you're in the right area.
Could be a business for someone listening right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's one of the most sort of untapped resources for growing food for a profit, at least legally.
Wow. And so shiitakes will grow on logs. What other type of mushrooms can you use log culture for?
I'm a big fan of oyster mushrooms. They are about the easiest mushrooms I know to grow. They can take a lot of neglect even in the process of drilling those logs, and they'll take, not quite perfect conditions of moisture and exposure and still produce for you. We have a lot of poplar, which is it's classified as a hardwood, though it's quite soft. So, and oysters love it, and they'll consume it within 2 or 3 years. So, usually, if you have a strong, good-sized hardwood log like oak, so you have about a 6 to 8 inch diameter log of oak, and you've put shiitake in that log can go produce up to 8 years. So we're talking about we're talking about a perennial food here. You put a little bit of input up front, and then it cycles for you for a number of years without you having to do anything more to it, except for just observe and make sure you get that fruit when it pops out. It happens very quickly. So I always like to keep my logs nearby. I usually start my logs under our deck, where there's even moisture, and I can walk by and see them and see, monitor them. And when those little mushrooms come out, they come out these little pinheads, and then within 24 hours, wow, they're full size and ready. So, don't stick them out of view, out of sight, because sometimes you'll totally miss your harvest. So I like to keep them nearby.
Now, if you live in a fairly dry climate, if you keep your log moist, is it possible to grow mushrooms?
Absolutely, absolutely. Paul Stamets in his wonderful book, Mycelium Running, points out different ways, and folks down in Texas half burying their logs. So, putting your log partially into the ground to help pull up some of that moisture. So there's lots of variations. There's a few guidelines, but there's really no rules when it comes to growing fungi. You can be really creative, and people like Paul Stamets have really pointed that out, with showing how folks are doing it in different ways in different climates. So really, they're very rewarding to work with. They're very abundant. So, really it's just jumping in and starting to play with them as I did. I'd seen them growing up at the Bullock Brothers Permaculture homestead, years ago. And just from seeing them visually happen, I was like, I can do this. And I just went out and just started learning, reading, and I got a nice catalog from Field and Forest, which is a very how-to-oriented catalog. And you get the pieces together, and you just start doing it. It's fun. It's almost like a kit. It's like doing a craft, and then wow, you get this wonderful reward of all these tasty fruits.
And the shiitakes too are very interesting to me because they have essential amino acids in them. They can be used as a tonic herb. They're very medicinal and a powerful fungi.
Yes, they are very medicinal in many ways. And I've also experimented growing with reishi mushrooms on logs. We have some wild black cherry. So I've been working with growing, some of the reishi, which is also very medicinal. And again, it's a market opportunity. In our community, we have a lot of Chinese, herbal medicine practitioners and acupuncturists and naturopaths, and they're clamoring for sort of semi-wild grown mushrooms like reishi. So again, another unsort of tapped market potential for growing things at home on a small scale.
That's exciting. And it seems very doable and, easy for people.
I was going to say it's very straightforward. We teach, workshops that are about 3 hours long. By the end of the workshop, you understand all the little bits and pieces that go into it. You've gone through the process, you've drilled it, and then we also put, hot wax over the little dowels when we put them in to help seal the moisture in and protect them a little more. But once you've gone through these simple steps, you're like, wow, that's it. Now I just need to put it in the right spot, which takes a little bit of, figuring.
Mm-hmm.
But once you've done that, you've learned how to do it, and it's very easy to replicate. And that's log culture. There's also growing mushrooms on wood chips.
And tell us about that.
Which is even easier, if it's possible to believe. And this way, you're not dealing with, chainsaws or, coordinating with someone to bring you a certain type of wood. Wood chips are often barely available, sometimes free from a local arborist. Be happy to drop them at your place than running to the dump.
How many do you need? What's the volume that you need of wood chips?
To do a small patch, you do not need very much. Now, the number one mushroom for growing on wood chips is the garden giant, also known as wine cap. And it has this beautiful burgundy wine-colored cap to it, and gorgeous mushroom. I mean, they can get huge, like up to 5 pounds. They have a very nice, smooth, meaty, nutty texture to them as well. In a way, sort of like portobello, but I think even more complex in their nuttiness. And they just go crazy in wood chips. They are so easy to grow, even easier than the oyster. You probably could start a patch. You can start a patch that's roughly 5 feet by 5 feet. So what is that? About 25 square feet, and that's about a yard of wood chips. So as much as a yard of wood chips, you could start working with them. And sometimes you can just buy hardwood wood chips from a local landscape supplier and have them drop them off to you as well. And they're quite forgiving. I think up to 6 months of age from being chopped and chipped, they can be used. Of course, a little sooner is better. Ideally 3 months or less. And as long as they're not coming from the side of the highway where herbicides and fungicides have been sprayed, they're good. And mostly, you want hardwoods. If you get a little bit of pine or something else mixed in, I wouldn't worry about it. But generally speaking, you want it to be a hardwood mix. In my book, Edible Landscape and the Permaculture Twist, we dedicate a whole chapter to growing mushrooms on logs and creating these patches for growing the wine cap, as does Paul Stamets in his book, Some Creative Ways. And it's very simple. If you're starting with sort of grass, if you're looking to grow these mushrooms outdoors, they like to be under deciduous trees. So that could be your ornamental dogwood, it could be your apple tree. And what you want is that sort of dappled light for these guys. What I do is I'll make a patch under a tree and let it also serve as a long-term mulch for that tree. So sort of stacking the functions at the same time here is I'll go ahead and I'll layer down at least, well, first, if it's grass, I'll start with cardboard. I'll get some clean cardboard and I'll put it right on top of the grass. And then I'll put 2 inches of wood chips on top of that. That cardboard just helps create sort of almost a fungal barrier to anything fungal that might be in the grass and on the ground. So I put down the cardboard and I put on about 2 inches of wood chips. Now, if they're not really moist already, I'll make sure that I'm letting them down as I put them down. And then what I'll do is I'll have a bag of sawdust spawn, usually from Field and Forest. And what I'll do is I'll take half of that bag, usually about a 5-pound bag, kind of a large Ziploc size bag, and I'll crumble it up and I'll spread it like seeds all over the wood chips. And then I'll take another 2 inches of wood chips and put it on top of that, and again, make sure it's moist. And then I'll take the rest of my spawn, that sawdust that's impregnated with the wine cap, and I will sprinkle it on top, and then I'll break that in a little bit, and then I will generously cover the whole thing with some fresh straw. And that pretty much is it. And then I will basically forget about it as long as we have, pretty decent rains. If we get into a drought, I'll probably go out there and, hose it down like you would your garden. But otherwise, as long as that moisture is trapped in there from the shade and the straw, the mycelium, that wine cap, is going to jump off and run through those wood chips amazingly fast. Within 2 or 3 months, you come back and you pull those wood chips apart, and it is just going to be a mosaic of white fungi strands running through it and gluing it all together. Yeah, it's really amazing how fast this fungi spreads. And sometimes if you've done this early in the spring, they're going to start fruiting that fall. You're going to start getting mushrooms as soon as that fall. If not, that following late spring and summer, they're just going to proliferate. I mean, hundreds of mushrooms, hundreds of wine caps just popping out all through the zone. What you need to do is make sure that you keep them fed. You need to bring in more wood chips. After about 18 months or so, after they're starting to consume it, you keep them going by feeding them, and then it's just on and on and on. And then what I like to do is I'll come along and I'll take a bucket full of those impregnated wood chips, and I'll take them and I'll start a new patch. I'll take one bucket of the impregnated wood chips and mix it with about 20 buckets of new wood chips. And that way, you're not needing to buy your spawn again. You're propagating it. You're giving it to your neighbors. You're making your own patches. And you are slowly spreading this fungi all across your landscape. Now, the benefits of this are not just those delicious mushrooms, but that fungi gets into the soil and spreads around the plants and the trees and begins to exchange nutrients and sugars with the plants and boosts their immunity, makes them stronger, makes them much more productive and resistant. So you're giving sort of an immune boost to your landscape as well as, getting this delicious harvest.
That is incredible.
Yes, and then taking that into the garden in the summertime, when your zucchinis are leafing out and your tomatoes and you've got this sort of dappled shade and consistent moisture in the garden, I'll take those impregnated wood chips and I'll make donuts around the plants and just spread them generally as a mulch around the plants. And again, the fungi will jump off and it'll eat the organic matter. It'll eat the straw and the other bits of mulch and things around the plant and run through the soil and exchange, again, all these beneficial nutrients to the plants, which then thrive. And then when you're out there getting your zucchini and your tomatoes, you're also harvesting the mushrooms. It's this win-win-win.
So your plants are healthier, you're healthier, and you're providing a home and place for these fungi to grow.
It is just fantastic. And at this point in my landscape, in our food forest, in our gardens, the mycelium is just showing up everywhere, places I haven't even moved it to. I'm unexpectedly discovering wine caps all over the place. So it really is, just taking over. As long as you keep enough organic matter out in your landscape, it's really going to spread through it, and everything just begins to flourish. I mean, it is the ultimate compost. It is the ultimate treatment, and really you're not doing much except for getting it going.
You're creating the conditions for mycelium to happen, and you're sequestering carbon.
Yes, big time.
Because the mycelium is actually the key player in carbon sequestration in the soil.
Absolutely. I mean, they're digesters. They're basically inverted stomachs. I think that's one of the reasons they're being classified into the animal kingdom is, they have the same digestive process as animals, except for their stomachs are externalized. So they're excreting enzymes into things and digesting them and allowing those to be consumed by their plants. So yeah, they're sequestering all of that and pushing it back into the cycle, into the living cycle again.
And I guess they also take in oxygen like us and emit CO2.
They are a fantastic universe. I mean, I definitely always throw in there to listen to Paul Stamets' TED Talk on how mycelium can save the world, and it points out and reminds us that they're a keystone species, meaning that without them, our ecosystems, our habitat would not exist like it does. We wouldn't exist if it wasn't for fungi. I don't think people realize that our relationship is that intimate.
And no decomposition, right? Wouldn't we just be living on piles of undecomposed material?
Yeah, I got a little illustration in my book of two little people at the top of a mile-high pile of wood. Looking down, so that would be them. One thing it might be, I don't know if there's enough time for it to add in, also with the wine cap, these wood chips that are covered in these threads of fungi, they can be used also to help clean up runoff from our roofs, runoff from our driveways, runoffs from our lawns. This can become a very useful tool on the home scale as well as a larger scale.
So you're actually helping to clean up your watershed by growing these mushrooms.
Yes, yes, yes. So what's being learned, Paul Stamets is helping lead the research on as well, is that mycelium is able to break down most chemicals and petrochemicals, oil-based chemicals, and convert it into sugars. So actually, not just absorb it and be like, oh, now we still have to deal with this somewhere, but they take the chemicals and convert them into sugars. So this becomes something that we can use on the home scale in suburbia, where majority of pollution to our watersheds is happening. It's coming off of our landscapes, and sort of a hybrid design, permaculture design, is taking swales, which are raised beds on contour. So when water comes into them, they're held and sunk into the landscape. Is take that excavated part of the swale where you would make a path, fill that with wood chips, inoculate that with wine cap, cover it generously with straw, and you can aim that just downhill of your downspout coming off your roof. So in your roof in the summertime, it's heating up, there's chemicals in the tiles, it rains, that comes off, that comes down, and if you don't help sort of harvest and digest that, it's going to run right into your local waterway and your watershed. But by putting in mycelium, by putting in intentionally, wine cap or oyster mushroom, when that runoff comes through the wood chips, the fungi will actually begin to digest, convert those chemicals and those toxins and make them neutral. So any water that runs beyond your swale is then cleaned. So very simple, very practical, and makes a huge difference in our watershed.
Using that wastewater to grow your mushrooms that's amazing.
Yes, and runoff on large scale, animal feedlots and other places, where animals are too concentrated, even small farms, it adds up quickly. And you can, again, you can help, clean and treat and utilize the nutrients of that runoff into something productive. So, permaculture is big on, turning problems into solutions, and fungi are the ones to partner with.
That's fantastic. And Michael, anything else you want to add about home cultivation of mushrooms?
Just to go for it, read simple ways to do it. It can be like anything. It can be overwhelming if you go into too much detail. My book is very how-to oriented. Listening to Paul Stamets' TED Talk will really, blow your mind to the universe of fungi. And then, getting a couple catalogs. Just get a catalog from Field and Forest, and it'll really kind of outlay the process and the materials you need to get started.
This sounds like it sounds like a gateway activity to permaculture and edible landscaping.
Love it. Yes, it's definitely the gateway.
Because you need a log and you need to feed. So basically their needs are moisture and food. And
that's it. I mean, it's very simple.
Mm-hmm. And do you eat a lot of mushrooms?
Yes. Yes, we do. We're scrambling to find new recipes all the time, because when they come in abundance. So yes, us and our friends eat a lot of mushrooms.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing with our listeners the benefits and how the ease in which you can have outdoor home cultivation of mushrooms. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Plant Report. The Plant Report is produced by Jill Cloutier and is a project of Sustainable World Radio. For more podcasts about plants, permaculture, and ecology, visit our website, sustainableworldradio.com, and you can also find us on iTunes, Facebook, and Twitter. The Plant Report is created for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any health condition. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to thank the plants for everything they do.